The best place to start is in the beginning. Heliocentrics believe that in the beginning there was nothing, and then that nothing exploded and created everything. And they say that that could be God. Okay, well, you need God for a lot more than that, first off. Because an explosion only creates two of the elements on the periodic table. Everything else would have to evolve from that, right? And to evolve from one element to the other is impossible. Now, science comes up with the excuse of fast fusion in the stars. But first, let's look at the laws of an explosion. Did you know that there's laws in an explosion? Because there is. There's laws of physics. They apply to everything. So within an explosion, what happens, everything spreads from the source, and every piece of debris coming out from the source is getting further from the source and further from each other and spinning in the same direction until they meet resistance. And there is no resistance in space. It was nothing. So when we look at the universe, if it's from an explosion, we should observe that every sun, planet, and piece of debris should be equal distances from each other in every direction, spinning in the same direction, and getting further apart from one another and further from the source of the explosion. But instead, when we look around, we got clusters of stars and planets with vast open regions of space. And then within those clusters, there's single moons going in the wrong direction, or there's whole clusters that spin in the wrong direction, which disproves your theory altogether. And my theory, or not my theory, Dr. Hovind's theory on that is that God put that way to make your theory look stupid. Makes sense. So, so far, Big Bang zero. Now, there are other limiting factors within our solar system if I stay within heliocentric science. Heliocentric science doesn't make any sense. The vacuum of space is an impossibility. So it's ridiculous of me to entertain these arguments, but I will anyway, just for teaching purposes. So Pluto is still releasing more heat than it receives, still cooling down from its creation. If all that's real, which it isn't. Pluto's totally misrepresented. So are the stars. Anyhow, fountains of the deep. So I'm sorry. I seen a video the other day of the stars, the real stars. So like it looks like just water and light, but you could see a hand go through it, and, like playing in the water, and made different ripples and stuff. And it's just fascinating me. I'm just thinking about an angel or God sitting beside a fountain and actually, just rubbing their hand in the fountain waters and just feeling the top of the water with your hand as you're talking to somebody, kind of thing, just not consciously. And us having to look at the stars, or happening to look at the stars at the exact same time, and seeing that little feeling of the surface of the water. And then the fountains of the deep. Well, if on their side it's a fountain, it's literally a pool, then, and it's full of water, right? Like when you open the fountains, not of the deep, but sorry, windows of heaven. Anyhow, so that proves that Pluto's still cooling down from its creation. If it was billions of years old, it should have been cooled down already, the surface. The sun shrinks every year about a foot. At 6,000 feet, it's not a big deal. 7,000 feet, it's not a big deal. 7 billion feet, that's a fucking big deal. Huge, huge difference. 10 billion, a trillion, whatever the fuck they say this universe is. Do you know how big our sun would be? And the moon gets about a foot further from the earth every year, or half a foot. So when you go back in time, do you know how close the fucking earth would be to the moon? So close that my niece, who just graduated university, was taught that the moon broke off of the earth. They used to be one. And that's why it's getting further away, because they both have gravity, so they would naturally get further apart from one another. Fuck. And then the moon's gravity is strong enough to affect the oceans. But when Buzz and Neil were on the moon, it wasn't strong enough to hold them down. The fucking shit you guys believe. Anyhow, so those are some limiting factors of the age of the universe as well. And those are all, like, breaks your Big Bang Theory, all the shit. So now, evolution. This is another science that doesn't make any scientific sense, right? Why would we think that unevolved animals from the past could do things that the evolved animals now can't do? Just think about that. If evolution's true, shouldn't we be evolving more now? Like, and be able to make hybrid pig, dog, chicken, whatever? Because, like, pigs are smarter than dogs. So if you could have a, hairy, loyal, barking pig with longer legs that could run and swim, but it was really smart, like, so you had a dog's body but a pig's brain, that would be very, very useful to mankind. But you can't breed a pig and a dog. Even genetic, with all the shit that we do in the labs and stuff like that, they've made a couple abominations, but not really. Like they can even clone people and things, but they can't clone and splice two things together quite right and get something real. So I don't understand why you think that, even though it just naturally happens in the past, but we can't force it to happen in the present. Doesn't make any sense. The soup that we were supposedly coming from. So Earth was formed, la-di-da, and then it rained on the rocks for millions of years. That's what we're told. And the rain on the rocks eventually made this soup. And then that soup got hit by lightning. And because we made the soup in a lab, right? So, but they had to put it in a zero oxygen environment, though it needed oxygen to survive. And then they had to add energy to it, but the energy was destructive. So they had to do it in such a way they couldn't just do it with a lightning bolt. They had to screw with the energy in some way in order to add it properly. And then so then they had to put them in water because they oxidized in the oxygen environment, and just everything in the soup died. But then the male and females of the organisms that were in the soup were separated further from each other once in water. They couldn't come in contact to breed. And they were in vast oceans or whatever, right? So what the fuck? And then rain on the rocks. How'd that make soup? Like, where'd all the other ingredients come from? And now you guys are like, oh, we've got aliens. What? Anyhow. So then you get into, again, this is a really good analogy, is if I told you that if you kiss this frog, it's going to turn into a prince, you would laugh at me, right? As an adult, I would hope. But at the same time, that same adult, if I said, if you kiss this frog and then wait 1 billion years, its grandbaby will be a prince, you'd be like, oh, wow, fascinating. Tell me more. What? The fuck is wrong with you? I just don't get it. How can you be that gullible? But I was that gullible too, and it was because we were little baby kids, and they drove this shit into our heads, right? I'm just gonna keep rolling with this stuff till I run out of time. I'll probably not get to say God bless you and goodbye. So God bless you and goodbye for later, because the video is gonna just cut off at 33 minutes. Anyway, so you don't have your soup, you don't have your clusters of planets, you don't have your galaxies. Something just landed on my truck. Seagulls, they do it all the time. So you don't, technically, so far you've got nothing. None of your science is actually validatable. That's not a word. Has no validity. How about that? Ooh. I hate when I do that. I hope you guys could hear anything that I've been talking about all this time. I'm just going to pretend that you did. Fuck's sakes. Um. So, duh. You've got all these limiting factors. Rain on soup. Rain on rocks does not make soup. Doesn't make the soup for life. You need other ingredients put into there. And then that soup can't breed. It has nothing to eat. Um, and it can't survive in the oxygen. So you don't have anything. And it was killed by the energy. It was killed by the oxygen. It was killed 3 or 4 times before it ever got built. But let's say by some miracle you got past that. You still, all the other limiting factors and all that other shit, right? You still don't have anything. Now, chromosomally, they say that, the more chromosomes, the more evolved, which was retarded because a fern has the most chromosomes. So that's the most evolved thing on Earth. And the whole cycle is off. We're fairly up there, for sure, right? But we're not anywhere near the top. That'd get I met this guy the other day, talking to him a little, arguing with him a little. He thinks that plants, I don't know, rule the earth or are the most. I couldn't really listen to him. It was really sad the way he believes that, like, we should all die for the plants, kind of thing. People say that. People say that the earth would be a better place without humans. And I used to think that too a little bit when I was a kid. But even then, I knew that it would be a better place, but it would be pointless. But what's it all for? If there's nobody to look at it, nobody to enjoy it, no higher species doing anything with it, it's just a bunch of animals running around and life dying and living and life cycles going on and nature happening, but for what? To what end? None. Just to have that cycle keep happening, to feed no one, just to feed itself. Where's the point to existence without intelligent thought and a soul and spirit and a mission on this earth? Like, there's a purpose that we're here. This is a phase of our existence that we need to go through, and it's not about the planet just surviving and going through cycles. It does that in order for us to go through our cycles, which would be generations, as we go through history, time, I guess. Anyway. So then with biology, they say that the unevolved man had these weird shaped skulls and things. Well, this bone ridge grows for your entire life. So if you're 700 years old, you're gonna look like a caveman. If you're like Adam, like 1,000 years old or whatever, it's gonna be really pronounced, right? That's not a caveman. That's a more evolved original man, like Noah or Shem or somebody like that. Shem lived to be like 600 after the flood. So that would have been really, really pronounced. Same as lizards. Lizards grow for their entire lives. So if you were to have like a, what are they called? The ones that the ocean swimming alligators, crocodiles. I think they're alligators that swim in the ocean. The great big motherfuckers. If you had one of those, they're like 18, 20 feet long anyway, right? Or close to that. And if you were to age that motherfucker to being 800 years old or whatever, you'd be looking at something the size of a boat. You know, those ancient crocodiles that we see, that we dig up the skeletons of. Well, there was probably a few hundred of those great big motherfuckers crawling around on the earth at one time, for sure. They weren't dinosaurs. They were just big lizards. They were old. They weren't cavemen. They were just really old men. The if you took an iguana and you grew it and let it just grow in the wild for 700 or 800 years again, or 1,000 years, the thing would look like some weird dinosaur creature, right? Stands to reason. So, and even the little lizards that we see, that like those little guys that can run on water, they'd be getting 8-9 feet tall. You know, your velociraptors. No, they were just those little running guys. And then they misrepresent them. And a lot of them are still around today, like the pterodactyl. They don't call it a pterodactyl. I forget what they call it in Africa, but we've shown these people pictures all around the Amazon River. And same as not the Brontosaurus, but the one that swims, that has the big long neck. Peleosaurus? Whatever. Anyways, the motherfucker's still around. Loch Ness Monster, or the fucking, but there's a bunch of them in the Amazon. Not as big as what they say Nessie is or whatever. And then they say that there's a bunch of them in the Great Lakes in Canada and the US and stuff. So the bodies of water are big enough to hide shit like that. Like it's like a wild cat. You don't see it unless it wants you to. Most of the time, like you don't. It's not. They're not an animal that you get to sneak up on all the time or whatever. Unless it's like you happen to be up above it on the hill and coming downwind. Anyway, so there's your dinosaurs, and even like the oversized cats and things. Again, the DNA was more intact, right? I'm sure that like tiger, lion, leopard, cheetah, whatever, were all one cat at one time. Same as black, white, Hispanic, Pakistan. We're all just one person at one time. We were all the 8 people coming off of that boat. Um, and all the males of which were of one family, one father and his 3 sons with their 3 wives, right? And the mother. Uh, so the only differences in us is the 3 wives, right? But I'll bet you that, like, and then you can go back again and say that, like, we all came from Adam. So Adam had, in his DNA, he had the information of all the different melanin colors or whatever. He was probably a generic color, like an East Indian kind of in the middle, not all black, not really white, but kind of in the middle there. And but his first son might have been white, his second son could have been Chinese, his third son could have been black, right? Just like the first big cat, he had a litter of babies. One was a lion, and one was a tiger, and one was a cheetah, and one was a leopard, more so, right? And the bear, well, he had a bunch of babies. One looked like a panda bear, one looked like a polar bear, one looked like a grizzly bear, one looked like a brown bear, one looked like a black bear. But it was all bears, right? Um, and then as far as like T-Rex and shit like that, well, first off, archaeologists, it's another field of science that's been totally corrupted. And so they've shit. I had a good one too, and I lost it. But they've misrepresented a lot as well. So they'll dig up a toe, a deformed human toe, and somehow they make the whole man and his wife from that toe, and they made them into like hairy monkey people, all based off of a toe. Well, he might have broke his toe a couple times or whatever, or had a deformed toe. And how do you know his wife's fucking toes? Right? Or his skull shape from his fucking toe, right? So they just misrepresent a lot. And they'll find like a T-Rex fingernail, and they'll be like, oh, fuck, let's make a whole T-Rex, right? And, well, we found these pieces here, and these pieces there, and these pieces there, and they all seem to fit together, we'll make this monster. And then it's like, well, is that like, was that all from one dig? No. They're all different digs. And we found different pieces. But it looks like it was probably the same creature. Well, don't mean shit, right? And so you could have arms from one animal, rib cage from another animal, skull from another animal, legs from another animal, tail from another animal. They've shoved it all together and said, oh, look, here's T-Rex. Right? And then they say, wow, yeah, they're all from different digs, but they're all the same. They're all T-Rexes. Well, how do you know that? Because we said so. I don't trust you to say so. And so a lot of that happens. A ton of that happens. And that's just called misrepresentation. And the field's full of it. Anyways, the other theory on that is the fallen angels were coming down and making giants, the Nephilims. They also made heroes like Hercules and things like this. Especially like their grandchildren. So Satan sleeps with this girl, has this kid. That kid sleeps with this girl and has another kid, and that's the kid who would be the hero. But it kind of worked that way throughout, because it's like Abraham was godly as could be. Isaac was good and whatever, but he was not spiritual. His wife was, but he wasn't. And then Jacob, the grandson, was again right through the roof spiritual. Anyway, um, so just uh, just interesting traits, I guess. Anyway, the long and short of it is all the science shit that we've been taught is all misrepresented. Not all, but is all full of misrepresentation. Full of it. And actually, this was taken to the school board in the 90s and shown to them, proven to them by way smarter, way more intelligent than me. And they said things like, wow, you can't destroy textbooks and you can't do this and you can't do that. And they kept coming up with the argument, oh, it would cost too much. And they were like, well, we'll volunteer. All these parents will volunteer. You know, will you? And the parents were like, yeah, we will. We'll come in and tear the textbooks out. We'll rip the pages out. And then the buddy was like, well, and really, as you're going through the textbook, like in a math textbook, you tell the kids to make the correction if there's something wrong. And he said, oh, it's defacing textbooks. You wouldn't do that. Anyway, and then finally at the end, he kept calling it lies. And they said, we don't like to call it lies. We prefer to call them misrepresentations. And they kept every single one. And they just keep adding to it. And then people say, I don't want to be religious because there's no science behind it. Well, no, there isn't science behind religion. But there's the Bible. And all the science is behind it. Everything points to the Bible when you know it, when you know what, extrapolate what the actual sciences are, look at the evidences, right? So, anyhow, my video is about to end, I'm sure, but I'm going to keep going, maybe. Yep. Yeah. So our science is so full of shit